Hello, Michelle Gray at
Hello.
dash art.com. I will put it at the end on a little title page also. So, there's been a lot of talk about, since I started talking about Erik taught me how to close open portals in people's energy bodies and homes and all their families and pets and stuff
Mhm.
that led in all these horrible, nasty creatures. And, I saw, you should see this one selfie somebody took with this, ooh, evil, negative.
Oh, I saw that.
That was
Oh,
horrible.
yes. That's
And
creepy.
also, at the same time, we open and close portals that pour, are supposed to be open to pour out abundance, creativity, abundance of every kind. And then she sent me an email saying, you wouldn't believe it. I just wanted to get rid of the evil stuff. But the next day, a relative just gives me a check for $75,000. So all these people are getting its abundance. This is crazy.
It's
So,
amazing work. Erik, I got to tell you, Erik says hi, Mama. He says he
hi, I
loves
love
you.
you. Oh, God, I forgot. But I
And
told you
he
this
says,
morning, we've been working all morning on people's portals.
well, he's showing up in it's so funny because he's wearing, like, in the 80s how tennis players would wear these white tank tops and really short shorts,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like the wristbands and the
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
And I said, I'm like, what's with that? And he says it's his, like, he's working out, that you guys are working hard. So he's got his
Yeah.
sweatbands on. Oh, sorry, aerobics, he says. Aerobics, not tennis.
Aerobics. Ugh, I hate
Aerobics, like a
that.
aerobics
I hate
workout.
that. I do
But he
not
says,
like
yeah.
to hear the sound of my own panting. It's just,
He says you're working really hard. You're working really hard and
yeah,
doing a lot
it's
of good work.
really, really hard work.
Hmm.
But so we just launched people are just wanting it so much
Hmm.
that I just told my son Lucas, God, just get the e-commerce by just a checkout, let people get it going. And right now up until now, we've been, signed, print out here's the waiver, print it out, sign it, take a screenshot. And it's just so cumbersome. So now it's like, we have this service, click on this, and we have checkout, and then terms and conditions checkbox. So it's so much easier. But we don't have all the rest of it that he has to do, the CSS or whatever,
Yeah.
about this, that, all that stuff. But we'll get that soon.
Erik says that this is an awesome family business. He's calling it the
Yeah.
family business.
Oh, it's so fun. I mean, I
Yeah.
love working with Erik, but it's services Atlantis Scalar, AR.com, but I'll put it somewhere. But anyway, the reason I want to talk about it today is I want to ask Erik some questions about how we can help people with mental illness. I've got a neighbor that's been around, we've been friends with, a family at the end of the cul-de-sac here, who has a son that was just, well, he is amazing, okay? He's an awesome soul. He'll just come by and just knock on the door. Hey, I want to check on you, Dr. Matthews, blah, blah, blah. Lovely soul. But all of a sudden, he just came down with schizophrenia. He was just head of the golf team, etc. And it has just made their lives very difficult and his life very difficult. So now I'm using scalar energy and Rife energy to try to heal him. And I did portal work on him first, but another thing is this one family asked for portal work because all of a sudden their daughter just took a nosedive mentally, and just had felt like these dark entities, and where she became very they were really just about to put her in a mental institution. She was just not functional. So I did it, and the next day she was just totally turned. And now she's pre-med. She has a new job she loves, and she's like a 360. No, a 360. I'll say 180. It's supposed to be 180. You don't want a 360 in that case.
Yes.
Let's take a 360 and get out of here.
Yeah.
So I just want to know what percentage of mental. I know people you can have a depression, and then negative entities can come. You can have a trauma, right? It blasts open these portals in your energy body, and of course your home or whatever, and then you get depressed, and maybe you turn to alcohol, and then negative entities will feed on that bad energy.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, then can negative entities, how often do negative entities actually cause mental illness? Can you just talk about that?
Okay, so Erik says what he's going to give us first of all is he says, "Are you ready for this, Mom? Because I'll give you a percentage of how entities, attachments of spirit are involved." He says, first of all, involved in mental illnesses. And he says that's 95% involved.
Involved in what way? How often, what percent cause it and what percent just feed on it? And you could go by, we can do different things. Like, let's start with
Okay.
PTSD. I mean, that's caused by trauma, and that blows open portals.
Yeah, actually, he said that's very high. And he says with PTSD, what's happening is that it's creating, he says, the trauma. He says a couple factors. So if we just look at somebody who's experienced life typical, he says typical, not experiencing any trauma, and something happens, whether it's an accident, there's been a severe illness to that person, to the family, there's been some sort of abuse. He says it's going to be a case by case, so it's hard to put it into percentage. But he says if we were to look at PTSD in general, we'd say 75 to 80% of people, it has to do with being spiritually attached to the trauma, because he says that it creates an open portal. The trauma does itself.
Right.
He also says that there's cases where some beings or some people are coming into the life that are carrying trauma from past lives. So they're
Oh,
already carrying something that's cellular or within their DNA, within their soul path, however we want to describe it. He says labels aren't important, but just to understand that it's within them, it's already there. So to crack it open with something that occurs, whether it's PTSD, so the same goes for mental illness, because you can have somebody come into life and say they had a mental illness in another lifetime or in several lifetimes. And so he says, think of it as when somebody has a broken bone and they break that bone and they heal it. And the doctor says, now be really careful with that. That's a really delicate, when you take this cast off, you want to be really careful because you can break it easy. It could be an easier break again. And he says, so think about that with mental illness coming into this life from a past life. It's very easy for something to trigger it, because he says it's, there's that percentage that somebody has a spiritual contract, they have something that's part of this lifetime that they're going to experience mental illness that may not really touch negative energy, although it could be part of it. But he says, so those are those percentages that don't include it. But he says for the vast majority, he's calling them fractals and entanglements from other lifetimes that are predisposed to being blown open by a circumstance or a situation in this lifetime. A lot more common than what we think it is, he says.
so it looks like in that case, the negative entities probably don't cause that, they just feed on the PTSD and just make it harder to heal, right?
Yes, he says, just to look at the difference between negative entity and he says like an attachment energy, because an attachment energy can be something that's like a psychic attack, like thoughts. Um, he says it's like which came first, the chicken or the egg, but that's what can carry forward in from another lifetime. So that person can have a heaviness. He says it's not a clean slate. You come into a lifetime,
Yeah, of
you've
course.
had many lifetimes before,
Yeah.
so you're coming in with a fresh perspective to start this lifetime, but you still have these little specks and crevices that have come forward from other lifetimes. But when it comes to entities, you don't carry forward the entities
Absolutely
from
not.
other lifetimes.
Yeah,
No.
they come through the open portals and stuff.
Yes.
Look, one thing is doing the portal work, opening, shutting the open portals that should be shut, opening the closed portals that should be open to bring in abundance, all that stuff, creativity and information. and getting rid of the negative energies and entities, but another is addressing the trauma in the present life and how it triggers past lives usually, but sometimes even future lives. And that is, I think, one of the most important things. For example, let me tell you this. I was doing portal work on one of my daughter's boyfriends. Like she has many boyfriends. My daughter's boyfriend, okay? And I asked Erik if he had any acute trauma in this lifetime. And said yes. Okay. To immediate family, yes. Parent, no. Self, no. Sibling, yes. Illness, blah, blah, blah. I have to go to 20 questions, more than 20 questions. But anyway, it was an accident. It was an injury. And many questions later, I found out that she was injured. It was an injury that required hospitalization. So I asked my daughter, and he said, no, he didn't have anything like that. Well, first of all, I traced it to when he was like 3 years old. And she said, no, he didn't have anything like that. You're wrong, Mom. She always wants to be wrong. But then she said, well, wait a minute. You're right. One of his older sisters was chasing him when he was like 3 years old, and he closed the glass door behind him. She ran through it, and a glass shard punctured her abdomen, and she had to have emergency surgery.
Oh,
and that caused a great deal of PTSD for him. So yesterday I did a past life trauma origin, which is one of the things that you can get on atlantiscalar.com. Well, service now is the services.atlantiscalar.com. Anyway, it is so amazing. Basically, here's what I got in 1900 something or other, and I get so much detail. He was a Navajo Indian, Navajo Native American, okay, in New Mexico. He was hunting buffalo with, the tribe, and his sister was there too. They were on horseback, and his sister was that sister. And he was bow and arrow, about to shoot. She was focusing on a target, but her bow was lowered by her side. I get so much detail. It's amazing what the pecking order was of the siblings, how many siblings was in there.
wow.
Who was in this present lifetime back then. Anyway, so she was running from left to right, crossed him at 150 feet. I get so much detail. It's amazing. And shot her in the left flank. So anyway, the surgeon, kind of whatever, extracted the arrow, but she died 3 days later, and he felt so responsible. Even the tribe did not hold him responsible. The surgeon, or whatever you call it back then, is actually his father in this lifetime. So same thing. I mean, the shard, whatever, it's just, and they mutually agreed before incarnation on that spiritual contract. And, he was to learn loss, self-forgiveness. That was a big one. I can't remember the other things, but self-forgiveness. He was to learn how to forgive himself. And I don't think he's learned that yet, So when you find that out, then you can heal. I mean, so that's why it's not just the portal work. I mean, the trauma is still there. You have to find out what acute trauma in this life triggered some past or future life, usually past, there is. And then, so he needs forgiveness work with the healer, and he needs past life regression in order to completely heal from this. I don't know if I will, but so
Erik said that, he goes, Mom, this is like the Cliff Notes. So this is he says, because yes, there is still work that's done with it, and there is effort that has to be taken.
Yeah, I'm going to get something out of the printer. Go ahead. Keep talking.
Yeah, but he says that this is like the Cliff Notes. So you're getting this information, and you may or may not, he says, resonate with it right away. But he says it will, because if you trust it and go through this process, this can take years off of the healing, years off of going through the process of healing. Because he says one of the big cycles that many get into when they're working through healing, whether they're consciously plowing through it to heal, to get further on their spiritual path, or just to feel better, to live more of a peaceful life, a life with fulfillment and abundance. He says we can get caught in these cycles of, well, I don't understand this, and we can get caught up on these details in our life and not be able to see what's behind it. So he says,
I'll tell you what he said.
This is it. Yeah.
Why? And this is why I asked Erik, I want you to lower the price of the portal work, because I want people to have money to do the trauma origins so they can heal. I mean, that's the main thing for me. People need to heal. Okay. And they need to save some money so they can go to a healer. So here's what he says, the benefits of knowing what traumas in another life were triggered by present life trauma, so you can heal. You will learn your spiritual lessons quicker. Oh, by the way, write this down, people. Go to YouTube and search for The Little Soul and the Sun, S-U-N, narration. It's a children's book. It's based on it is a children's book, written by Neil Donald Walsh, Neil with the E at the end. And that's the dude that wrote Conversations with God. He is it's a children's book, but it's sappy sounding.
It's good though.
It is so good. It explains spiritual contracts. It's like these two little things. Well, I want to learn about forgiveness. Can you go down and betray me? Yes, but please don't forget that I'm your friend. But it's so sweet.
It's sweet. Yes.
All right, so number one, you will learn, I'm not going to count because I'll lose count. Okay, you will learn your spiritual lessons more quickly. Is it quicker or more quickly?
Quicker. I don't know which sounds right.
Less likely to stray from your spiritual path and life purpose.
Yeah.
Some of you are teachers and you will be more effective as such. Abundance will come easier. Relationships with other people, including your significant other, will be stronger. You will feel more at peace and joy, and this will be on the eventual site, that Atlantis Scalar site. I interrupted myself. Where am I? A relationship with other people, including your significant other, will be stronger. Oh, I did that. You will feel more at peace and joy will come to you with less effort. That's really big. You will gain more wisdom. Who doesn't want that?
That's right.
You will have and it's less than the cost of your freaking cable bill. You will have a deeper understanding of why you are here and why others are in your life, our life. Oopsie. Typo.
Yeah.
Okay. You will have a deeper understanding of life itself. You will know yourself on a deeper level and understand why you react to people, circumstances, and situations the way that you do. Circumstances and situations, that's the same thing, right?
Well, yeah. I guess. I don't know. Makes sense to me.
It sounds, they're big words that look good. You will have more compassion and be able to forgive and accept others and circumstances with ease. Okay, you will be able to surrender and relinquish control with greater ease.
Yeah.
You will be able to shift perspective and see the larger picture when you need to, and you will see a great shift in your priorities.
Yes.
And that, people, is huge.
Priceless.
And it's not just about portal work, people. Seriously, I mean, this is it.
Yeah.
Right, let's go down. Let's look at other mental illnesses. What about major depression, not based on PTSD? How often is that created by negative entities, and what percentage is just they feed on it? Do the math. Do the math.
Yeah, and this is where he's like, Michelle. He goes, this is where math would have come in handy, because I was not a math person. Okay, so created by entities. He says created by, that's a little lower. So he's putting that in the 20 to 25%.
I bet. Yeah.
Because he says it's usually the other way around, where something is already there that they attach to.
Okay.
But he says the other way around, so revved up is how he's saying it, revved up by an attachment. He says that's much higher. He says we're looking with depression.
Oh,
so he says we're looking more up into 85-90%.
Okay, so the 85-90% they feed on the depression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he also says too, because he says, now do remember as we're saying this, that it's in varying degrees.
Of course.
Because every individual is going to have these different circumstances.
Yes.
But we're saying that, he says, this is how active what we're talking about is. And he says that it's the mindset. So in a third dimensional mindset, we're thinking about the technical part, the DSM book, all the medical stuff, and not realizing what is out there, what is actually going on. He says on multiple dimensions in different levels.
Okay. What about anxiety? And social anxiety too.
He says, no, this one's a little bit interesting, because he says now, this one we can also, because he wants to add a little something else with those that are empathic and feel greatly. He says, so we can increase this. So caused by entities, this would be a little bit higher. So we could say this is up to 65 to 70%, because having, if you're open, he says, if you're somebody that could even be dabbling with spiritual tools, doing things like that, then that's caused by. So even though you're doing something, but it's also just having them within your field. He says about the same, he says that one's a little bit different, but about the same. We're looking at 90%.
Wow.
What do you mean by that? He says that he's just saying that it's a little bit different with the anxiety, because it depends on how that person, because he says it's very sensory. It's sensory, like it's, well, everything is, but he's talking about picking up on it is like the presence of.
Oh.
So we're feeling into the presence.
Are you still talking
about empaths? But he says this is also for anybody, because he says even though an empath is going to feel it more. So what he was saying was, we are feeling beings, so we are receivers, and so therefore, if there's something within our field that has a lower vibration, then we're going to have a tendency to have an effect on one level or another. So he says giving percentages for this can be really difficult, because of the varying degrees of where people are at. But if we're going to look at an overall, he says overall, including everybody, we're looking at 90 to 95%.
Oh my God. Caused by?
No.
Or feeding off of?
Feeding off of, yeah.
And the caused by 60, you said?
Yes.
Kind of froze for a while, so I'm not sure.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. What about substance abuse? I think I bet a lot of them are probably just feed on substance abuse.
Yeah, he says that's right up there, 95% and over. He says, because we're dealing with, he says, different types of entities as well.
What do you mean?
More than one. So we have, he says, non-earthly souls. So earthbound, you mean? Okay, so earthbound souls, as well as entities like things that are not humanoid, like.
Oh.
that will feed off of that as well.
Okay, what was the one that was in the selfie?
Ooh, that's a good one. He's saying that that was an earthbound spirit.
It looked like it. Well, so what? So earthbound, and what are the non-earthbound? What are those?
He says when we start to get into, he says this is what he was talking about with interdimensional beings. We start to get into beings that are from other dimensions that he says depending on location. So he says, let's look at an example where, let's say somebody has an issue with dependency, regardless whether it's alcohol, drugs, anything like that.
That's,
And they move into a home that has had portals opened for, he says, the prime cause in this for these type of entities would be like seances. They've done some sort of something. What are you getting at? What are you trying to say? He's giving me actions. He's giving me the circle seances, but he's saying ceremony. Thank you.
oh, okay, okay.
Ceremony. He says, so when these types of things occur, and he says, especially, let's say there was a ceremony that had sacrifice to it, had something that wasn't very pleasant. He says it happens more than we realize that it does.
Says.
Yeah. And he says, so that opens a lot of gates to things that you don't want to mess with. But say that house sat open for 2 years and it went up for sale and it was a real bargain, and a family moves in, and we've got some dependency and we've already got some predisposed depression or something else going on because of what's happening in the family. And he says you've got a prime situation for there to be multi-level situations, entities, beings.
Do you recommend that if somebody gets a new house that they should do portal work on it? Or at least a scan?
Yeah, he says it would be a good idea. He says especially now, he's talking about things being very open as we go forward on Earth, that there is he says easier access, knowledge. We're going to have more knowledge. We've got more wisdom. And yes, he says it's a fantastic idea to do that. It should be included, just like a home inspection.
Whoa, I'm saying, yeah, it's going to be happening. What about scanning like a new job? You get offered a new job. Should you scan what do you scan? The boss, the workplace?
He says, yeah. But he says, for something like this too, let's say you're a bit indecisive. Let's say that you're not quite sure how you feel about something, or you just need a little boost. He goes, so whether you're having the portal work done on yourself or you're going to include that situation, that's going to help you with that direction. So yeah, he goes, that is important. But if you're feeling real good about it, you don't feel any uncertainty, then he goes, you're fine.
What about boss? So you have a new employee potential. Should you scan them? Or just do portal work on them? I don't know.
Yeah, he says yes. He goes, the portal work, it will work a lot better if that person has some knowledge of it. It will have a higher degree of success. So if you have somebody that you're doing the portal work on, he says you don't have to. They don't have to know, but knowing will help.
Kidding. I don't think that the head of some guy in Google is going to scan some perspective.
Well, he also says, he goes, let's look at what type of business you're having. So if you're hiring somebody, what are they being hired for? What kind of work are they doing? Are they coming into your house? Are they coming into your
like a babysitter? Yeah.
So he just said, what are you bringing into your family? What are you bringing into your home? He says, so yeah, for these type of situations, it's very situational. So yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah. Has to get out there though. It's still quite on the bleeding edge. Okay. So when we say addiction, substance abuse, there's no difference between the type of substance, right?
No.
All right. What about social? When you talk about anxiety, social anxiety, it's the same, right? Or is it?
Well, he says social anxiety includes physical situations. So social anxiety will include going into crowds of people,
Yeah.
being in situations that we can use our five senses to connect to. Whereas when we're just saying anxiety in general, it's a feeling, it's
Ah,
a feeling within us. And so it
yeah.
may be
Okay.
connected to things that we're not perceiving.
But are the percentages pretty much the same between the two?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What about, there's people that get auditory hallucinations like Erik used to, and I think he was hearing negative entities talking to
Hmm.
him.
Yes.
What percentage of people are locked up in mental illness or whatever that are really hearing negative entities talking to, but like on the radio show, we picked up an EVP that Ron Lederer, my lovely, awesome EVP expert, say,
Yeah.
"Fuck you," and it was probably the selfie entity, negative entity saying, because he was pissed off at us doing portal work. But anyway, it was that a negative entity pissed off at what we're doing.
That's it's so interesting because I got to tell you, before we started today, Erik had me do a little clearing and do a little extra to my routine and hold some stuff with me because of what we were going to be bringing up. And he's
Whoa.
saying that's exactly what he's talking about. So listen for EVPs on this in case something does come through.
Yeah.
But he says 90 to 95% is what we're looking at here. He says it's quite high. He says because it's you're open. He says very open, and this also can increase the depression.
Yeah.
This increases all of these other side effects. And he says what's interesting too is a lot of times when one goes to seek medication or goes to seek therapies, and they may or may not work depending on the soul, but depending on the situation. But if it does work, and they do tend to, because he says it has to do with the brain and
Yeah.
quietening down these areas. And he says, and there's also a belief system tied to the
Oh
medication,
yeah.
that the medication is working. And he goes, but that energy will then manifest into somewhere else within the body or within their life.
What do you mean?
He says, until you have an awareness or do something to clear it, if you are being plagued by negative entities,
And you're hearing voices.
you're hearing voices, you're seeing things, whatever, and say, he's using the example of somebody who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He says it's not the case for everybody, but a lot of times he says what happens is that, let's say this person goes to see a doctor, and he says they're put on medication, they're put on therapies, and because of their belief system, all of the reasons above the medication, those voices start to quieten down. They no longer hear things, they may no longer see things, and they think something's working. What happens is the medication, because of the belief system, because of how the medication works, that may have quietened that entity down, so they're not perceiving them in that way. But that energy from the entity will then manifest within them. If they're attached,
Mhm.
they will manifest into a different area. So it could manifest physically, or it could manifest in a circumstance in their life or
Give me a,
situation in their life.
can you give me an example of a physical manifestation?
Illness,
Oh,
infection,
oh.
he says cancers.
Like the
um,
person I'm treating, his face is super red. Could that be one of them?
Yes, he says it could be mild to severe. It depends on what the manifestation is. It depends on how severe the attachment is.
Oh, wow.
Um, so he says that that's why it does vary from person to person. But when you have something, he says, especially something that may have been with somebody for a very long time, because there
Oh,
are circumstances
yeah.
where someone will carry through their life and they'll get help or they'll get treated, and they may struggle. And he says everybody's heard of the person that's had a struggle from the next to the next to the next to the next. It's one thing, and then it goes to this thing,
I
and then
know.
they had this disease. He says that would be a candidate that would be a very good candidate for portal work for healing and clearing.
So you can get visual hallucinations too then with negative entities, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I noticed that when I do portal work, a lot of people say their complexion clears up. So negative entities can wreak havoc on one's complexion
Yes.
because that wreaks havoc on your self-esteem, and they just love that, right?
Yes. That's exactly right. He
So
says it depends on what your he says, well, the weakness, like where are you vulnerable? Where are you vulnerable in your body? Where
because
are you vulnerable in your mind?
yeah, my daughter Michelle, she's got beautiful skin now all of a sudden. So what other physical manifestations can negative entities cause?
Hair loss.
Oh yeah, I know. When I started doing it without totally refining my prayer of intent and perfection,
Yeah.
lumps, man, it was terrible.
Yeah. Hair loss. He says pain.
Yeah, I
Like,
got that too. Nausea. Oh,
yeah, nausea, stomach cramps, digestion issues. He says the body not being able to digest that energy, not being it because it's very stagnant. So you can have bloating. He says even some weight gain can go in that, because look at the cycle of what happens, and then that again causes depression.
like sleep
And
problems.
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. He says in any way that you can have something physically manifest into your body or into your life could very well be attached to an entity.
Wow. Mm. Interesting. So, all the more reason to get rid of this crap. Okay. So bipolar disease. How often are they involved in creating or just leeching on to the energy of that?
He says, depending on the severity, 70 to 95% bipolar, and he says borderline personality disorder.
Oh yeah. Okay. Creating it or leeching off of it on each one?
Leeching off of it.
How much is creating it?
25%, he said.
On each?
Fairly low. Yes.
Okay.
He
What
says
about?
they're very similar. They have a very
Oh
similar.
yeah.
Yeah.
And schizophrenia, what did we decide on that? Did we talk about it? Is it what percent leaching and what percent causing? I think it's probably higher causing it because of the hallucinations and all that stuff. Because I think a lot of people with hallucinations may be misdiagnosed as, and the paranoia misdiagnosed as schizophrenia when it's negative entities.
Yeah, he says 80 to 90%. And he said that we would be shocked to know how many people are diagnosed with schizophrenia that is negative entities. And he says, and a lot of them that are extremely sensitive, extremely psychic, and that have had some trauma in their life, or have had abuse or situations that may have also been triggered. And he says, puberty. This is another one. He says reaching puberty and having difficulty regulating hormones, and that starts to create portals, create openings. Self-esteem issues come in, and they start to play on that as well.
Love that. Oh my God, they love teen angst, I'm sure, right? The trauma of puberty, right?
I will tell you, you had found 6 negative entities with Erik in my home. Okay.
Oh.
And they, none of them attached, but they were in our home. And I have a 15-year-old daughter and also a 17-year-old daughter, both of them experiencing anxiety, social anxiety, both of them highly intuitive and psychic. My one daughter was having anger bursts, was going through periods of these anger bursts and couldn't explain them, just couldn't understand. You did that portal work, and that kid is different.
That's awesome.
Should
we do a special service just for teens, kids going through puberty?
Erik said yes.
Okay. We should make it very inexpensive. I think.
Yes, and he also said
$75.
psychic kids, like kids that are very empathic, kids
Yeah,
that have,
I want to do that. That's good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Lucas has got Shutterstock, so, and he's it's expensive. So what are we gonna do for that? Just like an image of a tampon. No, I'm just kidding. Let people know. Okay.
He just showed a face with all kinds of pimples on it.
No.
Erik.
Okay. Okay. What about multiple personality disorder?
Ooh, that's a good one. Caused by, he says that's a lot higher.
That all those things inside, maybe they're negative entities saying it's me. No, it's
Yeah,
me. Ah.
he says, and sometimes not even negative. He goes, sometimes it's just that person,
Ooh.
because he says they're not all necessarily negative, but he's saying that caused by, we're looking at 90% of this caused by.
Oh, what's the other? The person itself, the or angelic beings trying to help out, or what's going on?
He says sometimes it can be earthbound spirits that have found a connection. He says, think about how many times, he's talking about stories, like documentaries about people that have multiple personality, and they talk about how they have this relationship
Oh,
with the personality in their life.
so
And
they're
he
not
says,
necessarily evil.
no. He says no, they're not. And he says not all earthbound spirits are evil either. So there's varying degrees. But he said that, think about what we understand if we think about trance channeling,
Yeah.
and we,
Yeah.
he says there's also spiritual contracts that include this as well.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
So are these ones that are not evil? Are they sometimes, um, are the connections sometimes from other lives?
Yes.
Are
Yes.
they usually?
He says there's some circumstances where it's actually them from another life.
Oh my God. Like
Mm-hmm.
Elisa from another life?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
So
God, it can't be
he
two
said,
in the body of me.
let's
I
say
can barely stand to be in my own body.
he goes, your name is Joy, and you experienced a life in 1765, and he says, and you could be conversing with that version of yourself, but he says, Mom, what's the difference between somebody that channels and connects their higher self, and if they believe they can do so, they can bring in another version of themselves and communicate.
Oh, wow. Okay, people think I'm crazy already.
Me too, whatever.
I don't care. All
No.
right, what percentage of people are empaths, Erik?
He says 90% of people are empaths. He says only 10% would be considered, he says not completely disconnected, but not connected into their feeling. But he says how many are highly sensitive?
Yes, that's what I want to know. Yeah.
30%.
Wow.
30%.
All right, so I just want to tell people a caveat that working with tools of divination like dowsing rods, Ouija boards, tarot cards, etc. It's so important to have a prayer of protection, because I had a person recently that used tarot cards, and oh my God, all hell broke loose. It was really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to do portal work on her. But Erik, can you tell us the best way to create the script for a prayer of protection? And then after you create it, then you can substitute a word, like
Mm-hmm.
mine is apples, but you can create your own. But I like to every week read it out so it refreshes. But can you give us an example of yeah?
Yeah, he says it's okay to keep it simple. He says you don't have to go through this great big long list, but he says start off first of all where your beliefs are. If you believe in Mother Mary, Archangel Michael, he goes whatever that your strength is
I
that
use
you feel
God
power in.
source, but you can,
That's it. He says God, Source, Mother, Father, God, the angels, Archangel Michael, Jesus, Buddha. He says you call them in and you thank them for the circle of protection. He says you thank Mother Earth for the connection to Mother Earth. And he says basically it's just a matter of saying, I have this circle of protection around me. Thank you for keeping me protected. All other energies, entities are not allowed. He says,
okay.
so you want to make it very clear that you are protected, because the belief system is your subconscious that needs to believe that protection. That's what brings it forward. So you say, I am protected. The energies that hold that protection, that have that common, he says, weight to it. So the protection of God. And then he says, and then you state clearly that all other energies are locked out. He says that's
Yeah,
the importance
that's
of
what I
it.
say. All others are not welcome
Yes.
here. Okay. I have two other things. Like I did portal work on somebody's daughter, but I made the mistake of not, it's the only time I've made this mistake, and I won't make it again, of not completing it, because when it's complete, the dowsing rods stop together. But it wasn't really finished because, you know, so anyway, I did it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
But to 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 compensate for that, I felt so bad. I scanned her portal, the daughter's portals, but I also scanned the mother's portals, and oh my God, she was in worse shape than the daughter. And I think what happened was Erik made me mess up so
Yeah.
that they see that the mother was a mess, and that had she had so many negative entities that she was going to infect her daughter again with those. Is that true, Erik? For one?
Ding, 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 ding. You got
Okay,
it, Mom. He goes,
so
winner, winner,
I
chicken
think
dinner.
she needs to, yeah, get her negative entities taken care of.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
is that the case that, you know, that you can have negative entities that if you get one person in the family that's the portal work is done, if you have them, you can infect the rest of the family?
You can. He says not all the time because it depends on, um, okay, so he's giving me the example of, let's say that you have negative entities that are not attached to the other person, or he's saying strength, like not as strong. And so when you're clearing one family member, it can sometimes seep over and clear the other, depending on the strength. But he says if you've got an attachment and there are several of them, he says in this time in particular, it was so strong and it would have caused, he says in a very short matter of time, there would not have been any time. Okay, hold that thought for a second, Erik. There would not be any time for her to rejuvenate and get some momentum going before the other ones would affect. So he says, so if you were to, in a situation where, say, the mother had less on her, had very little on her, he says the daughter would be cleared, and then that would create a momentum with her energy. That energy would then affect the mother to start thinking differently, making different choices, because that's contagious as well, he says. So it doesn't just
Oh,
go one way. The energy can be contagious the other way. So, but he says in this circumstance, you had to do the mother too. It had to be done, or it was just going to be useless. Like it wouldn't, you'd be just doing it again.
yes, but in the portal work for the daughter, I wrapped her in her home. They live together, it seems like, because the portal count for the home was just totally the same. I wrapped in that in the home in a impenetrable, a golden shield that's impenetrable, to all negative influences, energies, and influences uh, for now and all eternity. So how?
Well, he says, but mom, remember that when there is an energy that is strong on somebody else, and that person, if that person starts to believe, so it doesn't mean that that's attached to her,
Yeah.
but it would affect her. So it would affect her. It would start to create, so she may not have
Yeah.
them attached to her like she did before,
Oh,
but it would still create the atmosphere. It would be like, he says, walking through mud, like
oh,
doing an
you're talking about
uphill
the dog,
battle for
right?
her. Yes.
Okay. Last question. Autism. Is
Mm.
there any negative entity situation there or energy?
He says this is actually fairly low. He says that a lot of times with autism, they're coming in with a contract and they're connected into a lot of the higher spiritual realms. He says
Yes.
occasionally they come in, they can be very open, he says, to ET energy.
Oh,
If
yeah.
there is a situation in a home where there is some low vibration activity going on. So if he says percentage wise, we're looking at maybe about 15% in this case. If there's some low vibration activity going on or attachments on other people, that can affect that person. It can create bursts of anger, but he says
Oh,
there's not the same, and he says this has something to do with the ego, that they don't have the same way of processing with the ego, and so they're uh, more in the moment, present with
yeah.
themselves, so it doesn't tend to create the same way as it does with somebody neurotypical.
Okay. What I usually do when I do portal work is I also substitute it with a word, but I say so and so is completely healthy physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually now and for all eternity. And I also say that all spiritual contracts are here for this lifetime. All previously agreed upon spiritual contracts for this lifetime are hereby permanently revoked uh, for any physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual condition, disease, or illness. So, would that work for autism?
He says in some cases yes, in some cases yes, um, but he's also saying that this is an experience.
Yeah, you don't want to take the human experience away from people.
So yeah, he says if it's
But
something
if the
to do
lesson
with
has
it,
been learned, I add that in just in case the lesson has been learned.
yeah, yeah. He says there are times that yes, that can change, and he says, interestingly enough, there's he says we'll throw this in as a label. He says like loopholes in the blueprint.
Yeah. So
That
guys, that's just a
yeah.
little extra service I provide. And Eric. All right, guys, we're gonna close up here. Eric, would you like to add anything else, sweetie?
He just says that he doesn't want this to scare anybody, because he says that a lot of people, he says even when that picture got a little freaked out by it, and he says don't let this scare you, let it empower you, that
Yes,
you
how
have
are
a
you?
choice.
Yeah, you got a choice to get rid of these assholes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he says and what's happening here is the power of doing this work is helping you empower yourself, because the important key here is that you then have greater power within yourself to direct your life in the way that you prefer it. So he says don't let this be something that you're scared of, let it be something that gives you power.
Now you have options. You know, you have options that empower you to change your life and to change the lives of people around you, people you love. All right, so you guys check out Michelle Gray. She's actually going to be one of the healers for AtlantisScalar.com, which now we only have services.AtlantisScalar.com, which I'll put here somewhere. I have to go like this because this looks gross. Anyway, and also you check her out at the healing art.com. I worked a lot on portals today. Very emotionally draining people. So
I bet. Yeah.
So I love you, Eric, and I love you, Michelle. Send me that
Love you,
information
Lisa. I
and the
love you,
links to
Mama.
other people, and I will talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
See ya.
See ya.